Hi, this is Rob McLaughlin. Welcome to Sound Advice. It's been a little while since we've been here. Thank you for joining us and coming back. Over the next little while, we're going to actually address a number of the questions that you folks have been asking through the comments, and we really appreciate seeing all of your questions. And thank you very much for taking the time to give us a comment on these videos. So we've probably got the next half a dozen videos planned out already based on your questions and your comments. And so today's what we're going to cover is how to connect my iPad and my router to one of the Allen Heath mixers. We've actually got a Q24 we use today, and we've got an SQ5. So we'll go through both of those, how to connect my iPad or iPhone with my router to our mixer. Here we go. Let's go. All right, so we're going to start the process to connect my iPad to my SQ5 in today's case. For this example, we've got an SQ5, and we really need 4 items to get this process going. I've already mentioned the iPad. By the way, on the iPad, I have downloaded the SQ Mix app. Okay, again, download that from the Apple iStore. I have obviously my mixer. Then I have to have a router, and in today's example I've got a TP-Link router. There's lots of them out there, but this happens to be the one I have. And then the last item is a network cable. Now this network cable is typically included in the box with your router, so not necessarily something you have to go looking for, but it will be included. All right, before we connect it, let's talk a little bit about the router itself. The term router, by the way, refers to the device that routes signal between 2 or more networks, and we actually have 2 networks created on this box. The first is our external network, and that is typically the single port that's different from all the others. It might be labeled external network, it might be labeled WAN, which is wide area network, and that is the port that you connect to if you were connecting this router to your external internet service, your ISP. Modem that you would get from your service provider, etc. That's where you would plug that into. Today's example, we're not going to use that network, that half of our router, because we're only going to connect devices internally in a local area network, or a LAN, and that's what these 4 ports represent. Again, this is a very, very typical configuration for most routers. They have an external network and an internal network. Those 4 ports are all part of our internal network. So that's what we want to use today. You know, if you have an issue connecting it, I've seen a lot of scenarios where we just accidentally plug the cable into the external or WAN port instead of one of the network ports. So we want to make sure that we do that. So I'll take this network cable, again, typically provided in the box, and simply connect it to one of the local area network ports on my router. Okay, and the other end of that is going to go into the network port on the back of my SQ5. Now there are 2 ports back there. One is marked network and one is marked DSnake. Important that you do not connect this cable to the DSnake port. DSnake is for using an external device, expansion box. But in this case, we're connecting the network, so we want to use the port that's specifically labeled as network to connect it to. And also, they both use the same connector, that RJ45 connector on the end of the network cable. They do use the same, and that's probably the one other place where sometimes you can mess this up, is simply connecting the network cable to the DSnake port instead of to the network port. Easy mistake to make, but it's simple to fix. Okay, let's go ahead and power on our router now. All right, that's going to take a moment to fire up. And while we're waiting for that, again, I've got my router powered on. I've got it connected to the network port of my SQ5. There's really nothing else you have to do on the SQ5. It pretty well plug and play from that part. Now I'm going to come over here to my laptop, or my iPad, pardon me. I've already downloaded the SQ app right here. But before I can open that app, I need to connect this iPad to the wireless network that router has created for us. So I'm going to open up here, make sure Wi-Fi is turned on, and I'm going to find the, in this case, TP-Link. I don't know if you can see that on camera, but TP-Link, this is just the descriptor. I got that off of the back of the router, by the way. And you'll notice this says 5G. We also have a second 5G, and then one that has no identifier. That would be the 2.4. So most routers today are what they call dual band. So they provide two different wireless network connections, one over 2.4 gigahertz, one over 5 gigahertz. The difference between the two of them and why you would select one or the other. 2.4 is built for distance. Let's say the easiest way to explain it. The 2.4 network is built for distance. The 5G network is built for speed. So on the 5G connection, you get a better, more robust connection, but the distance is limited. On the 2.4, you get a little less robust signal, but you get more distance. All right? So it's a case of how close are you physically going to be between this device, my iPad, and my router over there. If you're going to be quite close, then by all means use the 5G, because it's going to be the stronger of the two signals. There's actually some of the TP-Link routers, and I'll see if I can find the exact model or the description. Some of them actually offer automatic switching between the 2.5 and the 5 gig, so that when you are close enough, it will switch you to the 5G. If you get further away from the router and you need distance, it will flip you over automatically to the 2.4. That's a kind of a handy feature. Okay, so we've got connected here. We've got a little check mark there. If you can see that on camera, little check mark connected to my network. So now I'll flip over to my app and launch my SQ MixPad app. Again, this is particular to the SQ, and I'll see that on the list of available mixers, there's my SQ5. SQ5 is right there. Simply connect. All right. Now, you can see I'm already seeing signal, and that's because I'm running some music from my little iPod off the side here. So let's see what happens if I put this kind of close so you can see. And you'll see that I have remote control access to that fader on channel 1. Now I'm not hearing anything because I also got to do the same thing over here for the master. So I bring the master up, and maybe you can hear my iPod playing in the background now. Again, remote access. You can bring that fader up, shut it right back down. Hopefully you can see that both on screen there together. All right, and that's it. I now have complete access to all the functions of the SQ5 on my iPad app. All right, it's easy, straightforward as that. My iPad connects wirelessly to the router. The router is connected over a Cat5 cable to the back of the SQ5, and I'm ready to go. I now have remote access. And again, I can hit the mute, for instance, and we'll see here that the mute has lit up. If I turn the mute off, then I have music again. Can mute it, there's mute again, back and forth like that. So, all right, there we go. Okay, for part 2, we're back. We're going to go through the same process to connect to my Q24. The process itself is basically identical, and but there's just a couple other things I'll show you while we're going through. So again, back to the 4 items that we need to get connected. I've got my mixer, in this case my Q24, got my iPad, which by the way, I have downloaded the QPad app for. This is a separate app. QPad app is a different app from the SQ app. So depending on the board that you're using, you have to download, of course, the appropriate app, and we'll take a look at that. Third, I have my router. I'm going to utilize the same router I had. And 4 is my network cable. All right. And again, this is a standard Cat5 cable that comes with most routers. I don't think I've ever come across one that didn't have the network cable connected to it. So we'll just mention again, in case you've skipped through the last part of that video, is that this router typically has two networks in it. One is an external network, or a WAN, wide area network. That's where we connect our internet service. We're not using that for this purpose today because we're just connecting devices together in a local area network. And that's with these 4 ports. This configuration of ports is fairly standard amongst routers, so we want to make sure that we use one of those 4 LAN or local area network ports for this project today. Again, if there's an issue of not connecting, etc., quite often one of the typical troubleshooting things is we find that sometimes the network cable gets plugged into the WAN port or the external network side of the router. Want to make sure it's plugged into the LAN. Okay, so there's our router. Router's plugged in, it's ready to go. Let's plug in the network cable to the back of the Q24. I'll do it over here. And so I'm plugging this in. You'll notice that there's a port actually called a network port. Yeah, go ahead and change that camera for me. There we go. And so we actually have a port labeled the network port, but you'll also notice there's the D-Snake port. Both of them use the same RJ45, which is typical for Cat5, and it fits there exactly right because it's the same connector. But we do not want to use the D-Snake port. We want to make sure, plugging a router in, we're plugging it into the network port. Okay, and you'll see that our little traffic light comes up there right beside it, and we are good and ready to go. Okay, let's go back to our other camera now. We'll go back to here. All right, so I've got my router powered on and connected to the Q24. Q24 happens to be up and running already. Now to my iPad. Again, first thing I need to check is I'm going to go into settings and make sure that the iPad itself is connected wirelessly to the network that we've created with that router. So into Wi-Fi settings, and there it is. We happen to already be connected from my last example there. But again, just simply selecting what you see from that list. There we go. That's my Wi-Fi connection. So I now know that this iPad is properly connected to the router. Now, because I'm using a Q24, I want to fire up the QPad app. And there it is right there, the Q Mix Pad. And sure enough, if I look on the list, now is my Q24. Trying to get that on camera for you there. There's my Q24 listed there. I select Connect. Connect as the admin, that's the default. And you'll see that once again, I already have signal on channel 1, and that's my my little iPod that's running some tracks there. Connected that before I get started. And you'll notice that if I now run up the fader, I have remote access to that fader. And I'm not hearing anything because I also haven't turned up the main left and right. So I'll do that, turn up the main left and right, turn up that, oh I see it's also on mute actually. So if I hit mute, there it is, there it is. So I have remote access control to the fader, that channel, and even the mute function. There's the mute, you can see that I'm turning the mute on and off. Hopefully you can see that over there in the top of channel 1. Turn that mute on and off. Bring that channel fader back up. There's my track again. And so that's it. Okay. As easy as that to connect your iPad, and you can connect multiple devices, of course, wirelessly to that same network on that router and have access to Q24. One thing I will mention is just be aware, this iPad is able to run the Q24 software because it's a little bit older than the SQ5 software, and this iPad would run both, but I have an older iPad that is able to run the Q24 software, but it will not run the SQ5 software just because it's a slightly older iPad. And the SQ software, I believe it's actually iOS 11 is the minimum requirement. So if you have an older device that will only update to, usually it's about iOS 9 or somewhere in there, then you'll probably be able to use it on the Q24, but you wouldn't be able to launch the SQ5 app to use it on an SQ mixer. All right? Okay, a couple more questions we want to answer about your router. While we're here, we'll talk about changing the name of the router and also hiding that name, or hiding the SSID, just so that it doesn't appear on the search names when you have a bunch of devices all looking for available networks and your network won't be there. I'll also show you how to change the password, and we'll take a look at a few things. So I've got my laptop powered up here, and I've fired up my browser. In this case, it's Microsoft Edge. Doesn't matter whether this is Windows, doesn't matter what browser you use, Chrome, etc. Doesn't matter if it's a Mac and Safari. You just have to have a browser, because the software for the router is already installed on the router device itself. Okay, so I am going to turn on my Wi-Fi, and I can see that I have some Wi-Fi available here. I'm going to select the TP link for my router. It's available, and I'm going to select connect, and it's going to go through its process to connect me there. Now, while that's doing that, I can come back now to the search bar of my browser, and I'm going to type in 192.168.0.1. This is the default router of probably about 90% of the, the default IP address of about 90% of routers that are out on the market today. So that's the actual IP address of the router itself, and this will connect me to the device. So 192.168, I just noticed I typed that wrong, 192.168.0.1. Hit enter, and that's going to bring me to the actual software. Here is my software for my TP link. This software is browser based, and it's already installed on your router. So as soon as I connect my browser to 192.168.0.1, it's going to launch that app that's already on your router. So this is where we're going to be able to configure things. So I'm going to type in the password. I've already put that password in there previously, so I'll type that in, and here I am connected. No, I don't want to save my password right now, thank you. And here I am connected. Now there's all kinds of things you can do on this software, and you, by all means, take a look and poke around what you're interested in. But I'm just going to show you a couple things, and that is, first and foremost, on the internet, or the wireless tab here, you'll see that we have 3 networks listed. And we saw this earlier when we were connecting the iPad. We have a 2.4 gigahertz network, we have one 5 gig network, and a second 5 gigahertz network. So this, in fact, is actually what they call a tri-band router. In other words, it's got 3 bands on it. And you'll see that there is a name for each one of them, okay, and an option to hide that SSID. Now, one of the nice features about the TP Link router is it will change this automatically. All right, so in order to do that, we need to go to Advanced tab and over to, again, wireless, back to wireless, and wireless settings on the left. And you'll see that in the TP Link software, we have an option called Smart Connect. Okay, now what Smart Connect does, there are a few routers that do it. It's becoming more and more popular, but the TP Link does it, and it does it very well. It will automatically switch you to the appropriate one of those 3 networks based on your requirements. So we talked earlier about the fact that a 5G signal is a very strong signal, but it has limited distance. Whereas a 2.4 is a slightly lesser signal, but it's built for distance. So when you need the distance, you're far away from your router, you're on the far side of the event in an auditorium, or you're outside, you need the 2.4 because you need the distance. You're that far away from your router. But when you're close to your router, you might as well take advantage of the 5G signal. It's nice and close. Well, this is what Smart Connect does. It does this automatically. It detects where you are in terms of that distance from your router based on the strength of your signal. And if you are close enough to use the 5G, it will automatically switch your connection over to 5G. If you get out of that close range, it will automatically switch you to the 2.4 because you need the distance of the 2.4. You need a more distant signal. So this is actually a really great option. So what's going to happen is when I turn on the Smart Connect, okay, it's going to tell me it's saved. If I were to go back now to Basic and select Wireless, instead of seeing 3 networks, now I only see 1. And that Smart Connect option is going to take care of swapping me to the appropriate network. So this is a great feature of TP-Link routers. It's why I happen to like them personally myself. Again, becoming a little more popular in other places too. So on this screen, this is the name that the router has given to my network. It's called TP-Link 292B. Well, I don't happen to like that, so I can change it here. I'm just going to backspace over this, and I'm going to, since I'm setting this up specifically for my SQ, I'm going to call it SQ5, SQ5 wireless. All right, so that's how I changed the name. I can also change the password. I'm not going to do that right now. And the other option we can do is to hide that SSID. So hide that name. So what that means is that when a device is close by, a cell phone, and you know we'll get into crowds and everybody's got a cell phone, that starts looking for a list of all the available networks, you know, through the network option on that phone. This SQ5 wireless router network is not going to show up on the list. We're going to hide it from that list. All it means is that you know it's going to be there. If you happen to have to connect a new device, you're just going to have to type in SQ5 wireless manually. It's, again, not going to show up on that list. So I've made those changes. Changed the name, kept the password, and hide the ID. Click Save. It tells me it's saved, and we are good to go. Here we go. Available networks. And it's just going to take a minute because changing those names causes my router to reboot. So I'm not going to see it right away. I'll turn this off, turn it back on again just to refresh so that hopefully I can get that network to show up. And someone just pointed out to me, of course, while I'm sitting here trying to get that network to show up. Guess what? I use hide the SSID. It's never going to show up. That's exactly what hide SSID means. And I realize some of you are yelling at your screen right now. All right, so now we're back at my iPad. We've made the changes to the router. We changed the name, and we also used the option to hide the SSID. Again, hide the SSID means it's not going to show up on this list, and that's what we want. We don't want everybody in the venue to be able to see my network on the list. So on my iPad, I'm just going to select Other, and again, I have to type it in. I just have to remember what it's called. It's called SQ5. SQ5 wireless is what I called it. And this password is, all right, and click Join. Oh. Okay. Did I put a W? Did I put a capital on the W? Probably.
So that's important.
Yep. And there we are. So sure enough, I had put a capital on W for wireless, but now I am connected. And there, SQ5 wireless. So now I'm connected. Again, I can now fire up my SQ software. And there is my SQ5. Now shows up on the list, and I can select Connect. And I'm back to having remote access control of my SQ5 on the SQ app. All right, so that's how to change the name and the ID and password if you wanted. You could also do that in there too.